1994, the performance Zenith. My first role in DAH Theatre was that of a shaman, whose passage reverses time backwards, bringing to the days of youth old Milivojević, the central character of this performance. Historians and anthropologists trace the origins of theatre in ancient rituals. Likewise, the origin of an actor is in the shaman. In the old times, the shaman had the role of a healer and artist. A shaman is moved by an inner impulse that manifests itself through artistic expression. A shaman is a creative healer that connects an individual and his tribe with their own personal mythology, spiritual powers, and awakens an insight to the surrounding reality. If I were to define myself as an actress, I would take this definition of a shaman as true. To be an actress in my theatre, DAH, requires this role and this responsibility. The costume designer, Boris Chakshira, had the task to create a shaman's dress that would include elements from our country. So, this dress in its upper part has a kilim, a rug, made in the south of Serbia. We required elements from Yugoslavia because the performance Zenith dealt with the first avant-garde artistic movement in Yugoslavia. The inspiration for the lower part was in the Russian national costume. The dress has two parts. Because during the performance, I transform myself in front of the audience into my second character, the fortune teller. My third character from the performance Zenith got his name from an anti-hero from the work of Milivojević. For us, our hunger was a metaphor of power, evil, militarism, government. While working on this character, I realized that there is a public character and and is reduced in form. I realize that the men in power do not move much, and that they usually use their hands and fingers to give orders. The secret anarch is its true being. It is a grotesque, a caricature, a deformed freak. While working on this character, we even used photos from the daily press that in 1993 and 1994 showed the politicians and the men of power. Depending on whether anarch would wear a hat, a cap, or a mask, he would represent a politician, a general, a policeman, or a director of a theater. One of the ways for us to progress and develop in our work is by introducing obstacles. By overcoming these obstacles, our being gains new heights. As an example of these obstacles are these army boots that I use in the performance. They're heavy, and they're some sizes bigger than my size. But with their help, I overcame the lightness and airiness of a dancer, and I obtained some of the qualities of sharpness, heaviness, and also some of the principles of the male energy. In the performance, the legend about the end of the world. One of the main obstacles were various objects that covered the floor of our performing space. These objects were various metal objects, coffee cups, a small wooden city, and shells. Because the performance contained scenes where we had to run, jump, fall. Every step had to be precise so as not to step or move these objects. One of the secrets of our performance was that the shells were placed on an imaginary map of a country that does not exist anymore, but that we were born in. Ljubljana, Zagreb, Sarajevo, Mostar, Dubrovnik, Novi Sad, Beograd, Niš, Podgorica, Skopje. performance The End, the legend about the end of the world, had also moments of complete stillness or minimal movement. One of the biggest challenges of every performance is to sustain the attention of the audience, even in scenes with minimal movement or silence. He or she should be able to fill the space with hers or his inner energy and presence. In these walks, we also use various Japanese techniques that make the body of the performer shine with presence by introducing various obstacles. So my obstacles in this walk were high heels that they wear during the whole performance, a sack with 15 kilos of salt, the little objects that are on the floor, but also a task to walk through different textures with resistance. While changing the textures through which I walk to, the resistance changes. And in this way, a simple walk becomes interesting and dynamic. It is also important to find in stillness rhythm and change that will make it interesting from the outside. 1996. We started to work on the performance Angels' Memories. We decided that this performance should contain memories from the characters of our previous performances that were brought to life through the characters of angels. So this dress got its wings. It also got a hat that I sewed fringes to find out later that these hats are worn all over the world, in Australia, Brazil, and Korea. In Australia, they wear them to protect the face from the insects, but in Korea and Brazil, shamans wear them, believing that with a flicker of frills, they will more easily pass to a different reality. Madrid, 1937. In the Plaza de los Angeles, the women were sewing and singing with their children. Then the sirens rang and the houses brought to their knees in the dust. spot. And while turning, your head always returns to the spot. And you avoid dizziness and nausea. But my task was to keep the head and the body aligned. And while turning, to use some of the principles of the whirling dervish. So every time I had to prolong the spinning for a little while, day after day, so as to stop the nausea, until in the end I was able to whirl the required amount of time, do the physical score, and also say the text. One of the obstacles that we used while working at the performance, the Helen Keller case, and it was an obstacle that we dedicated a long part of the process to, is working with blindfolds. Blindfolds are an obstacle that evokes in us deep fears, but after a while, the fear disappeared, and what we achieved was an enormous amount of sensitivity. This work with blindfolds helped me to achieve the sensibility and the physicality of the character that I performed, the deaf and blind Helen Keller. The work on the Helen Keller case lasted for 1 year because it was interrupted by our various tours and travels. In one part of the process, Dijana Milošević, our director, gave us as a task to bring different musics that evoke in us different emotions. The emotions were hate, love, compassion, sadness. As my starting point, music for compassion, I brought Leonard Cohen's famous Blue Raincoat. I must explain that the starting point is the starting point for a score. A physical score is a fixed sequence of actions in space. So I had the music, and my task was to create this score. But while doing the score, slowly, I started to follow the physical actions with the words of the song that had for me a strong emotional input. This was the favorite song of my brother in our teenage days, and I loved it also. So slowly, bit by bit, I started to follow the physical score with the words of the song. They started to come from me in a very strange voice, a voice I never knew was in me. I never recognized before. So we decided to name this voice the KOJE resonator. And later on, this voice entered the performance as the voice of Helen Keller, as her inner voice. I use, instead of the text of the song of Leonard Cohen, I use the text of the performance, but I still have in it the reduced melody and rhythm of the song.
The main constant, not to be forgotten, is that two of my senses are perpetually down, for seeing and hearing. The whole range of my perceiving happens in what most people consider to be the invisible. Invisible is a term I have imported from the sighted world. It is but one of the many tales told to me, into me, so that I could form an abiding picture of the world.
There are two ways to create material for a performance. The first approach is to start from scores based on our own personal inner stories. These inner stories can be memories, events that really happened from our childhood or past, or they could be dreamt events, imagined events. Even though the starting point could be a song, a picture, music, a poem that has nothing to do with our own personal lives, the score is always personal. And the story is always the expression of our conscious or subconscious being. There are three places where I usually am in my personal scores. And these are three cities or three places where I lived or I'm still living. So the first place is New Delhi, the capital of India, where I spent most of my childhood years. The second place is Belgrade, the city I consider my home. And the third place is Ljubinić. It is a little village close to Belgrade, where I spent the greenest part of my childhood. In 1997, we had as a task to create a score based on the theme Smells from the Kitchen of my childhood. I will now show you little pieces from this very long score, and I will explain on the way what each of the action in my inner story means. Ljubinić, the big yellow house of my grandfather and grandmother. We kids are standing in front of the big black cupboard on whose top are the cakes and the cookies throwing things in the dirt. Sometimes she crouches at the table, where she touches the shoes of the people sitting at the table, the spiky, high-heeled shoes of the women, the big, bulky shoes of the men. Somebody tries to caress her, but she doesn't like it. Parts of this score were put in different parts of our performance. You will recognize some of it in the wild Helen, to which her teacher and companion, Annie Simon, played by Milivojević, is trying to reach. One part from the beginning of this score is put later in the performance as the already developed relationship between Annie and Helen as a little game. Many wondered why we did a performance about an American artist, writer, in their times. But for us, Helen Keller was a metaphor of our country, that deeply involved in darkness, in silence, and almost complete isolation, had to find a way towards light and humanity, as Helen did. The second way to create materials for a performance is by starting from a technique or a form, and later filling this technique or form with our own personal motivations or inner stories. This technique we used a lot in the performance of the documents of times, starting from Japanese Suzuki theater technique. We filled the steps with form, and all the movements, all the walks on the stage were based on the Suzuki training, but we did the steps reduced with the quality and composition of old women. So what we achieved was to have the fragility of an old person, at the same time annotating the energy and effort that this step requires. Then we used some very simple actions, like my partner and me, Alexandra Jelic, that we did towards one another. So, like, for example, when I look at Alexandra there and I just lift her up and carry her around. Or she's there, so I take her head and I make her walk towards me. These actions, later, done in the piece, with the quality and the bodily composition of an old lady, sometimes reduced, sometimes done in repetition. Because our task was also to dance. Later in the performance, got their own meaning. So we fill a form with inner stories, searching what these already existing have an idea, we did not have a big topic that could somehow explain the lack of sense and the terrible destruction that was going on. So starting from pure technique, we came to the idea of old age construction. We realized that the people from Belgrade and the people from Yugoslavia were just going on through another bombing, another war. The old women in the performance are centuries old. They're the documentators of time that carry
By the time we're done with dancing elsewhere, darling, you'll be glancing, and the night's a river torrent tearing us apart. Mere melody and tway, we're carried by a stream, refugee along the road. You lose your way, so you can't see, no place in particular zone. You glance away, your house has disappeared, the sweater you've been knitting hasn't heard. You live for it, and everything you feel comes to you in this undoing world. Contemplating it together, prophets and by ocean weather, dance between the lands and our mothers she may be. On the blessed broken-hearted, watching for her dear departed, for her children cast upon the sea. After wrath, the great land of justice, swords of the peoples, hundreds making justice private property. Darling, never dream another one might have been your mother. Someday you may be a refugee. A refugee who's running from the wars, hiding from the fun-wanted world. Eternally, a person outdoors, desperate in this undoing world.
In February that same year, we did a performance called Travelers. This performance dealt with the theme of traveling and immigration. But then because of the events, and because we had within the troupe American actress and the British actor, we performed this performance only 3 times, and never again. So, in this performance, I deal with the character of Mr. Lotnikov, an old Russian actor in exile. So to the character and way of walking of this particular gentleman, I came in a very interesting way. All of us received from our director, Dijana, a little postcard from different countries of the world. Our task was to create a physical score based on this image, and my postcard was from Algeria. So, most of my score was based on one little image of an old woman Plotnikov is bitter. He's half real, half ghost. He flows about the world. He travels from one continent to another, from one country to another, from one century to another. He travels like the camel from which he got his walk. So it is not surprising that he walked also in our other performance, Maps of Forbidden Remembrance. But in Travelers, Plotnikov says this text. No, better not to be seen again than to be seen humiliated. This is why I decided to renounce acting. To have worked with Milivojević that brought us all in contact with a better world. Is this why they killed him? Is this why they killed, censored, and sent the best of us to death? Because we knew how to achieve what they only proclaimed. Because if we achieved it, they would not be able to promise it. So I decided to renounce acting. But never mind. Someone once said that acting is like sculpting in snow. of the character of a shaman that they talked about at the beginning of this demonstration. I got from my directors, Dijana Milošević and Anđela, a book by Jan Kot called Stony Brook. This book contained essays and also a description of a shaman's dance. But to my surprise, and to the surprise of my directors, I discovered in this book a couple of my photos.